All right, we're going to give it about just another minute and a half or so here, and then we're going to go ahead and get started. I appreciate everyone's patience. All right, so it is just about 11:03 now. So at this point, we are going to go ahead and get started. So hello, everyone. My name is Nick Cortina. I'm one of the technical resources here at Exago. I'm also joined by my colleague, Emma Williams, who's going to be listening in and trying to help answer some of those questions in the chat. And first and foremost, we want to welcome you all to this month's Exago Technical Lab. And before we start to dive into anything, if everyone could go ahead and just type a Y or a yes into the question pane there, just to let me know that I'm coming through okay and everyone can hear me. That would just be great. Thank you. Perfect. And it looks like everyone's hearing me okay. Okay. So before we do start to dive into some of these examples, I do just want to be clear that as this is a technical lab, we're going to be diving into some slightly complex examples and even looking at some chunks of code here and there. Now, I don't mean to scare anybody off here, but I want to make sure that everyone is fully aware that that's the direction we're going to be headed in today. So to get started, I'm going to talk a little bit about two advanced chart attributes that we found particularly useful. We're going to dig into some action events that will expand upon those given attributes. And finally, we're going to walk through a fully integrated example of using action events to add some flair and interactivity to your dashboard charts. So let's begin by jumping right into an example report I've built for us to use. And that's going to be number of orders. So on this report, we can see that I've created this chart. And I'm going to dig into the underlying data here. And I've structured it in such a way that my data labels are going to be each of those months. And I'll have one series for each employee. So for each employee, for each month, I'll see the number of orders that employee made. So I'm going to hit finish, as this report's kind of already built for us here. And I'll go ahead and run this report. And we can see I've got everything but the chart suppressed, as that's sort of what we're interested in here. And if I go ahead and start stripping away some of these extra series, I'm starting to see some behavior that isn't super visually appealing to me. For both the Buchanan and Dodsworth series here, we have these single values that are kind of off alone here and are disjoint from the other pieces in their respective series. To get around this, we can use the advanced attribute connect null data. Connect null data is going to walk through each series of a chart, and wherever there's disjoint pieces, it'll connect them to kind of fill in those discontinuities. So to add this attribute, I'm going to go back to my report editor tab. I'm going to dig into my chart wizard by double-clicking, and I'll go to my appearance tab here. And we can see that I've got the advanced features over here on the right-hand side. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and add connect null data. I'll click add attribute. And one note, many of these advanced chart attributes behind the scenes are actually simple Boolean values. And connect null data does happen to be one of those. So in order to turn on this advanced feature, we simply have to set it to 1. So at this point, we can hit finish. And now if we run the report again, I'll start minimizing some of the series that we aren't necessarily as interested in here. Now, the series still connect, but they're not going to display an actual point value where no data exists. Now, this is nice, but I might say that having the line connect straight across here might be a little confusing because in reality, there isn't any data for this node. We can see here that connect null data is nice because it's going to fill in these holes for us, but it won't add any preceding or trailing values that may be missing. If we look at the Buchanan series here, there's no data for both January and February, but connect null data won't fill anything in here because there's no other piece of the chart further back. So in order to work around this, we're going to dive into our first action event called populate null values. So to dig into the code behind this action event, I'm going to move over to my administration console here. And now on the left-hand side, under our extensions, we can see that I've got my action events. And I'm simply going to open up populate null values. Here we can see that we have to define our action event with a name. We've got custom code that we'll look at in just a moment. The event type is load because we want this action event to fire when that chart loads. And we don't have to assign any global event type or any UI items. So at this point, let's dive into the code and see what's going on. So here, we're going to create this action string in C# that'll actually hold the JavaScript that we want to use client-side. In our JavaScript, we're first going to find the length of the data set in Fusion Charts. And now this number in Fusion Charts will be the number of different series. So in this example that we're looking at, there's 9 different employees in the Northwind data set. So this value will be set to 9. The next thing we're going to do is look at the length of any one specific series. Here it'll be that first value as we are zero-base indexed. And now these these series will all be of the same length. And so because we're tracking months here, there will be 12 of these nodes in each given series. And Fusion Charts is going to allocate space for each series according to whichever one has the most values. So even though the Buchanan series doesn't have any data for January or February, there's still space allocated for January and February nodes. Their associated value is just null. So at this point, because we know that those nodes exist, their value is just null, all we have to do is use a nested for loop, the first looping through each given series, the first looping through the list of series, the second looping through each specific node in each series, and wherever we find a node that has a null value, we'll replace that with a 0. And this is going to force those values to appear on the chart. We can see here that I've got a JavaScript debugger statement, and this is actually just going to halt the execution for us so we can take a look at that underlying chart structure and get some more idea about what some of these things are actually doing. So at this point, I'm going to hit OK. I'll navigate back to my report designer. And now on our number of orders, I'm going to add this associated action event. Now, before I go ahead and run, I'm going to hit F12 to open up our developer tools here so we can look at that underlying chart structure. And now when we go ahead and run, we should see that that developer tools will be brought back up for us. We've hit that debugger statement that we left in our JavaScript. And now if we go and look at this client info chart data, we can see some of the information that we can access and modify to sort of alter what's going to actually appear on that chart. At this point, if we start to look at this dataset object, we can see it's a collection of other objects with a length of 9. So each of these will correspond to one of those given series. Digging into one of these, let's say the last one, which is Buchanan here, we can see another array, this one called data, that'll hold all of the individual nodes for this given series. And by that same note, we can see the length is equal to 12 here, as there should be one for each month. Now, as we go through, if we were to look at one of the first months, say January, where that value used to be null, we can now see that it's got an actual 0 assigned to it. So at this point, I'm going to minimize my developer tools and continue the execution so we can see how the actual chart output has been modified. Again, I'm going to strip away some of these other series. And at this point, we can see that for both Buchanan and Dodsworth, wherever there weren't points before, instead of connecting straight across, we now go down to a point that has a value of 0. Minimizing the Dodsworth series, we can see that this action event will also hit some of those values that connect null data would normally miss, specifically speaking, preceding or trailing null values. This is going to bring us to the conclusion of our first example here. So I want to pause for just a minute and give some time for people to ask questions. So if you do have anything that you're curious about, feel free to post it in chat. And if there's anything that we think we should share with the group, we'll certainly go ahead and do that.
Hey, Nick. Hi, everybody. This is Emma. We got one question. I just wanted to see if, Nick, you could go back and reassign the action event to the chart and just really quickly show again how we did that.
Yep, absolutely. So just to kind of cover it from the beginning to the end here, once we create that action event, and if this wasn't already existing in our admin console, we would add it here like this. Now, that being said, since we already have the action event here, in my report designer, I've got this linked action event button. Now, I should note, by default, this functionality may not appear in your environment. It's something that you'll have to enable in the admin console. So if you don't see this linked action event button, that could be the cause there. But with this chart cell selected, I'll click my linked action event, and I'll just remove this action event and re-add it. We're going to use this plus add, and this will give us a list of all the associated action events that we can access from our admin console. So here I want to pick that populate null values, as that's the one I want to use on this chart. And once I have that selected, I can just hit OK here. And then when I go ahead and run the report, we'll see that the action event will fire for us. And again, we're hitting this debugger statement. If we continue the execution, we can see that the output now reflects that action event. Okay, so it looks like we're doing okay on questions for now. So if there are no other questions at this point, I'm going to move on to our next example. So I'm just going to do a little housekeeping, just get rid of some of that stuff for me. So at this point, I'm going to open up a combination chart that we've created. And here we can see we're charting the average order quantity for each employee as a line chart. as well as a count of all their respective orders as a column chart. And if I were to go ahead and run this chart, we'll see that it does look fine on its own, but maybe I decide that I want to initially display the values of each point to my users, so they don't even have to go and hover over something to see what it is. They can just immediately know from looking at the chart. This will bring us to the next advanced attribute, show values. This attribute is one that we've actually built out an interactive menu control for. So navigating back to my Report Editor tab, I'm going to go into my chart wizard by double-clicking on that chart cell, and I'll navigate to my Appearance tab. And we can see on the left-hand side here that by setting this point labels to series values, even just going to my size and preview, we'll start to get an idea of what those numbers might look like displayed on the chart. And based on my preview here, I think this is what I want, so we'll go ahead and hit Finish. We can run the report again. And this is great. However, right away, I'm not really liking that some of my displayed values are overlapping. I really just wanted to add clarity to my chart, and things seem to be getting a little too clustered. So rethinking this report a bit, I might decide that it's really important to see the order counts immediately, while the average order quantity maybe isn't as important. So if I just want to display the values of one specific series, we'll use an action event to do that called single series display values. So again, I'm going to move us over to our admin console, and we'll look at the actual action event once again. Here we can see that I again have just the name. We've set it to be custom code. The event type is load, as we want it to fire once that chart loads. And there's no global event types or assigned UI items. So digging into the code here, we can see that this one's a little bit simpler. So the first thing, again, we're going to create that action string in C#, and that'll hold the JavaScript we want to use client-side. In the actual .javascript, we can dig into the underlying chart structure by going into that chart data again. And each advanced attribute is going to be stored and can be modified by manually setting the value. As we saw before, you can do that already in the Exago menu. But the nice part about doing this in the code is that here we can specify one series to modify that attribute for and not have it take effect on any other given series. When we use the advanced attributes in the chart wizard, those will apply across the entire chart. So sometimes creating the action event is going to be able to give us a little bit more control. So again, we can see that we're going to set that show values to 0 for this one series. And then we're simply going to launch that debugger, and I'll leave the debugger statement in here so we can again look at the underlying chart structure. Navigating back over, I'm going to go into my report editor. I'm going to highlight my chart, and I'll click on linked action event. At this point, I'm once again going to hit add, and I'll leave it on that single series display values. And at this point, let's go and run that report again, and I think I should still have my developer tools open. And again, that debugger statement will fire for us. And so looking at this chart data, we're going to go down, and again, in this instance, because there's just those two series, we can see that this data set is of size 2. And now if we go in and look, we can see that for that series we specified, we're going to have that show values attribute being set and assigned a value of 0. So at this point, I'm going to continue the execution. And here we can see that those values are now being displayed simply for my order counts, but not for my average order quantity. Now, it's nice because I can still highlight any of these points to see that specific information, but it's not staying up and sort of cluttering the chart in the way that it was before. So this is going to bring us to the conclusion of this second simple example. So again, I want to pause for just a couple minutes and sort of answer any questions that you folks may have, so feel free to type those into the question box now. So we received one question that I think would be best to answer sort of to the group. So these examples that we're using here, I'm actually going to be working with our docs writer to get them incorporated on our support site. So once those things are updated, you guys will be able to access some of these examples simply by going to the report site and pulling the code from there. At that point, we'll include instructions on how to add them to the admin console and all that good stuff so that it'll be easy for you guys to apply them to your system if you'd like. All right, so it looks like we're doing okay on questions for now. So at this point, we're going to get to the final piece of today's lab, which is going to be a little bit more complex. And here, we're going to look at a more fully integrated example where we use an action event on one piece of a dashboard to modify other charts on said dashboard. So I'm actually going to navigate over here, and I do just want to note that this example is a bit more complex in that Exago is now going to be situated within a host application, what we call our internal demo app. And at this point, we can see that I'm going to be logging in, sort of simulating what a user might do to go into your host application. Up until this point, nothing on the screen is actually the Exago application just yet. And another note that I do just need to make for this example, we actually have all of our extensibility features stored in a separate assembly as opposed to our admin console. And all we've had to do there is update our references in our host application as well as Exago to look at that assembly for those extensibility pieces. And the reason we did this is it prevents our base configuration file from becoming too cumbersome when we list out all of the things like custom functions, action events, server events, and what have you. So again, for this example, I'm kind of keeping things sort of situated in a fully integrated way. And we could say that maybe for this dashboard, we want to just use one simple button click to launch. And so here we can see that this is a sales dashboard with some information for each year on the left-hand side, as well as the top 10 customers and bottom 6 employees here. And so, you know, right off the bat, you can see that this is a decent looking dashboard. Everything looks fine. But for the fun part here, if I go and click on any of these given years on the left-hand side, we'll see the two charts on the right are going to update themselves automatically to reflect only whichever year I click on. Clicking again on any other year is going to update that chart once more. And if I were to go ahead and click the already selected year, I'm simply going to reset my dashboard. This is going to be the result of an action event called chart filter other dashboard items. So I'm actually going to bring us over to Visual Studio so we can look at that extensibility assembly. So here you can see that the first thing we do when we're going to actually call this action event is pull in that JavaScript action. And we're also going to look to find the dashboard filter field that we want to be filtering by. In this example, it would be that year. And we're also going to be looking for the dashboard click color. Now, here we're using custom options to pull those values in. These custom options can be set up in the admin console and given a name and a value. And that value can be a specific value for each different report you have. So while the custom option name will remain the same on each report, its value can change on a report-by-report basis. This allows any given end user to enter in the values they want to use for these custom options. So if they wanted a different filter field or a different color, they could set those up on the report themselves. One other note, if we wanted, we could use things like some user parameters stored in the session or even hard code values for these if we'd like. But those are all sort of implementation specific questions that you'd want to consider when looking at your system. So for now, we're just going to proceed with these custom options. And in our case, as these custom options can be that user-driven input, we're first going to want to check for null or empty values here. And then we're going to sanitize the input just to be safe. Finally here, we're going to start to see that we'll load up our JavaScript code using this helper function we've created called load.js code. And all this is going to do is simply look into our project here and find the appropriate script, in this case, chart filter other dashboard reports. And we can see that the next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to format that so that we can send it both the filter field and the chart color. So if we go and look at that chart filter other dashboard reports script, we first are going to check to see if an element is already selected, and if necessary, save the original color of the selected item. Next, we're going to loop through our chart items, resetting all data points to be unselected, and get rid of any extraneous dashboard filters. Then finally, save the original colors. The last thing we're going to do here is set the color of the selected item, update this given chart, and then finally make a call to another JavaScript function that's actually just down below here called filter other dashboard items. This function is taking a Boolean to tell us whether we need to add or remove filters based on whether the item was either selected or deselected. We're also going to get the click filter field, the actual value that we want to filter by, and then lastly a Boolean to tell us whether or not we're going to animate on execution. Here, we'll then create a collection of the reports on our given dashboard while excluding the current chart. And then we're going to loop through those reports. If we need to add a filter to so that the selected point will become accurate, we add those filter values. If not, we're simply going to remove them. At this point, we've covered the JavaScript that's going to be used here, so we can move back to that action event. And we can see that once all of that JavaScript is set for us, we'll set that to be our JavaScript code, which will load that up for us client side. And then we'll return so that the JavaScript will run on the dashboard. Looking back at our example, if we start to click on this guy more, we can see all of that being reflected in the actual output here. And so that's going to be our full walkthrough of the integrated example of using one dashboard chart with an action event to modify the output of other given charts on the same dashboard. At this point, we're going to hang out for a couple minutes and try to answer any questions that you folks might have. But thank you so much to everyone for tuning in, and happy reporting. So we did get a question of where we bind all that up to set the filter field associated with the left chart, etc. And so I think what I'd like to do is I'm just going to go into launching our full UI so I can show you guys exactly kind of where we set that up. And we can see I've got some kind of custom coloring and other things here, as this is my local version of our demo application. But I'm just going to go and search through. And so this is that sales numbers breakdown, the report on the left-hand side of our dashboard that we were looking at. And so what I want to point out is first our custom options. And again, as I mentioned, we set these up in the admin console. And then we set the associated values here. So you can see for our chart click color, we've just got some hex values. And for the click filter field, we've actually got this little formula that's the year of that order date field. And then on the given chart here, we've got that associated action event, chart filter other dashboard reports.
Hey, Nick, we are actually not able to see that screen that you're referring to. Would you be able to maybe pull it into our view and go over what you just said again?
I apologize, my screen was frozen there. So can everyone see my screen at this point? Okay, looks like I'm getting some yeses in the answer question box. Great. So again, let's start in the admin console here. Here we can see custom options all the way at the bottom of our extensions list here. And if I were to go ahead, we can see that all we have to do to create these custom options is give them an ID as well as a type. Once these are set, I'm navigating back over to that demo application here. In the report designer, under options and custom, we can see that I've got access to those given custom options now. And I can set those values on a report by report basis. In this instance, we're using that blue color for our chart click color, and then the year of the order date as the filter field. And then finally, to add the actual action event, with that chart highlighted on the report level, we go into Add Action Event, and then we're going to select the Chart Filter Other Dashboard Reports. I'm going to hit OK. And in the full UI, what I'll do is go ahead and run this dashboard again so we can just see the output one more time. And I'll minimize some of my stuff here for you folks. And again, we can see that clicking on any of these guys will update those two on the right-hand side.
Thanks, Nick. That seems to have cleared up the question all together. It looks like we don't have any other questions coming in. We'll be here for a couple minutes, of course, so if you're still typing, continue to, please. We love the interactivity. Other than that, I think huge thank you to Nick and a huge thank you to everyone who attended. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing you next month. Yep, just got a question about the recording. Just to clarify, you guys will always be sent a recording of the webinar to follow up, just in case you weren't able to attend it or you missed something, you want to show it to people you're working with, etc. You will always be given the recording. In addition, they are housed on the support site, so you can also access them there and any previous labs if you didn't happen to register for them or any other possibilities.
Oh, looks like Emma beat me to it. I was going to post. We got a question on where those support labs are located, and I just got it open on our screen right here, but it looks like Emma beat me to it and posted the answer in chat. I'm going to send that link to everybody, so if anyone else is curious about that, you should be getting that in the chat just right now.
Great. All right. Thanks, everybody. We're going to wrap up. The recording will be sent out pretty soon later today, and we thank you again. Look forward to seeing you next month.